There are artifacts that, through their use, acquire a mysterious sacred aura, becoming relics so revered that many are convinced of the divine and magical nature of these objects. The Holy Grail from the Last Supper, or the Spear of Longinus, which is said to have pierced the body of Jesus Christ on the cross, have been sought for centuries by leaders like Napoleon Bonaparte or the German Führer. Today we are going to talk about an enigmatic case from the Spanish Peninsula, where a sacred object came into the hands of General Franco that is said to have helped him not only win the war, but also remain in power throughout his life. Franco never had any doubt in his life about the protection this relic gave him, to the point that he took it with him wherever he went, traveled with it, and slept with it. We are talking about the incorrupt hand of Saint Teresa of Jesus, which accompanied Franco until his death. Today we'll learn about this story.
Les habla Reinaldo José Carrillo Vilches, esto es La Nueva Enciclopedia y los invito a que nos den un gran apoyo dándole me gusta a este video, dejando sus comentarios que siempre los leemos todos, activando las notificaciones en la campana, suscribiéndose por supuesto al canal y compartiendo este material con todos sus conocidos en WhatsApp, en redes sociales y en cualquier otro espacio. Así que sin más nada que agregar, empecemos con la historia de hoy.
To begin this fascinating story, we have to go back to the 16th century, the glorious era of the Spanish Empire. It is in this land of intellectual warriors where Teresa of Jesus was born and raised, who would become the founder of the Order of the Carmelites. Discalced, dedicating her entire life to serving the word of Jesus and spreading it among the communities most in need of faith, she was canonized in 1622 by the Catholic Church. When Saint Teresa of Jesus died on October 15, 1582 in the town of Alba de Tormes in Salamanca, she was buried in haste in the chapel of the convent in the town, out of fear that the deceased might be taken to some other place connected to her life. However, at the request of Father Geronimo Gracian de la Madre de Dios, who was Saint Teresa of Jesus' spiritual guide and most faithful friend during her life, the body of Saint Teresa was secretly exhumed. After 4 days of removing all the earth and stones, they looked in amazement at the incorrupt body of Teresa of Jesus, as it was as well preserved as when it was buried. It was at that moment, convinced of the holiness of the woman, that they decided to separate some parts of the incorrupt body of the saint to keep them as relics, starting with her left hand, from which the little finger would also be removed months later. The little finger by order of Father Gracian de la Madre de Dios, who kept it with him for the rest of his life. During his life, according to his own words, the father never again suffered from any notable illness, and from then on, people began to believe in the powers of the saint's hand. It is noteworthy that the famous reliquary holding the saint's hand was made in the 17th century. It is anthropomorphic in shape and made of gilded silver and precious stones. The incorrupt hand of Saint Teresa of Jesus, after passing through the hands of Father Gracian and other priests, it was eventually taken to the Discalced Carmelites of San Jose in the city of Avila, the birthplace of the saint, and later it was taken to the Carmelites of San Alberto in Lisbon. But in 1914, the government of the Portuguese Republic enacted a law separating church and state, which led to the expulsion of many religious orders. The hand remained in Portugal until 1920, when the Carmelites were expelled and dispersed among the various convents in Spain. Later, they managed to reunite in Ronda in Malaga in 1924, where they also brought the incorrupt hand. However, a peculiar fate in history awaited this metaphysical relic. We are in the first half of the 20th century, a time of extreme political turmoil in Europe, where nationalists, liberals, communists, and conservatives are fighting each other in the streets. Spain is no exception to this rule, and in the midst of a strong internal conflict, the figure of Franco Bahamonte emerges as the leader of the nationalist side and future head of state. The nationalist side, led by Franco, was made up of different groups that shared a common goal: the defense of the Catholic faith. Meanwhile, on the Republican side, there were communists and other groups that promoted state atheism. And during this conflict, a particularly significant event would take place. The south of Spain, specifically the municipality of Ronda in Malaga, had come under the control of the Republican side. The anti-clericals proceeded to assault the Discalced Carmelites convent, along with other churches in the city. Although the nuns managed to escape, the reliquary with St. Teresa's Incorrupt hand was taken from them. But sometime later, the city was taken by the nationalist army, and they found the valuable reliquary in a colonel's suitcase. When Generalissimo Francisco Franco was informed about the discovery of this reliquary during the war, he immediately requested that it be transferred to the city of Valladolid to be displayed in a grand exhibition, along with other reliquaries and works of religious art that had been appropriated by the anti-fascists but had been recovered. By then, it was already believed that the hand of St. Teresa could have miraculous and providential powers. General Franco, a devout Catholic since his childhood, formally requested the ecclesiastical authorities to grant him this reliquary, as he believed, quote, that it would help him win the war against the Reds, end quote. The Catholic Church, which had declared the Spanish Civil War a national crusade, did not hesitate to give the incorrupt hand of St. Teresa to the Galician general. Let's move forward a little more than a year, and on March 28, 1939, the nationalist side celebrated a victory that some considered even miraculous, with Franco at the head of the army. This March 28th was the same date as the birth of St. Teresa, who was later proclaimed as the patron saint of Spain. Since he received the relic, the Generalissimo gave special treatment to the sacred object, convinced that this hand would protect him from his enemies. He never parted from this relic, not at night while sleeping, not during official trips, nor on any occasion, as we will see later. He even appointed an official whose sole mission in life was to transport and protect the relic of St. Teresa with his own life, a relic that presided over the head of state's daily events. But where did this kind of obsession of the caudillo with this relic come from? It's important to note that this reliquary was not the only one that the Generalissimo of Spain had in his hands. He also had the right forearm of St. Francis Xavier and the mantle of the Virgin of the Pillar, which remained with him throughout his entire rule at his residence in El Pardo. He also owned the sword of St. Ferdinand, King Ferdinand III of Castile, which was a treasure venerated since the times of the Reconquista. But among all those relics, the left hand of St. Teresa became the most precious one for the head of state. As has been said, both the general and many religious people were convinced of the protective powers of the hand. From the beginning until the last days of his government, there was no shortage of conspirators and enemies of the Francoist government who tried to end his life or overthrow him. However, Franco was always one step ahead of his adversaries, and despite all his enemies, he managed to remain in power. He was firm and stable until the last days of his life, and there were those who attributed this success to the protection of the hand of St. Teresa. Franco was very religious since he was a child and considered the Catholic faith as his true support. Already in his possession throughout his time in office, Franco jealously guarded this sacred relic in his official residence, even taking it with him when he went on vacation with his family. Franco had a special kneeler made for his bedroom, on which the famous hand used to rest. Therefore, he never lost sight of it. It had become his talisman. The hand that protected him was like Hitler's spear of Longinus, which was believed to have the power to make him invincible. In any case, during the time it remained in his possession, whether in his bedroom or in the reliquary, Franco used to lend St. Teresa's hand to the church several times throughout the year, so that it could be venerated in processions and masses. One of these occasions was recorded in 1939 under the headline Relic of St. Teresa to be featured in the Carmen procession. However, it was always returned to the general's residence after these events. For 40 years, Franco ruled without ever parting from his relic. Blockades, conspiracies, international plots, and so on came and went, but Franco and the Incorrupt hand remained unmoved. Finally, Franco's death came after a long life in 1975. The old reliquary had set in its hilt, on the back part, the Laureate Cross of St. Ferdinand, a beautiful gold and diamond decoration that Franco wore daily on the lapel of his general's military jacket. When the Incorrupt hand was returned to Malaga, the relic was given a triumphant welcome. A crowd of people waited for the arrival of the procession, and the nuns were finally able to embrace the relic with great joy. Visited in the convent of Ronda by pilgrims who come from all over the world, especially infertile women who wish to become pregnant. But that's not all. Several miracles are also attributed to it. The hand is displayed every day during Mass in a niche beneath the image of the Virgin, while for the rest of the day, it can be venerated in a chapel. In our times, when materialism and scientism have gained a lot of ground, it's common to dismiss any belief that invokes the metaphysical, from the existence of a God, and even more so the possibility that some objects possess supernatural powers. However, until very recently, not only was belief in God common, but there was also certainty that spiritual forces intervene in our world. In the case of Franco and the Incorrupt hand of Saint Teresa of Jesus, there was no doubt for some that the grace of God was manifested in this relic, which accompanied, protected, and helped Franco in his great mission to safeguard faith and order in Spain. Thank you all very much from the bottom of my heart for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I remind you that your support gives us a big boost and is a great help. By interacting with the channel, leaving your comments, liking the videos, sharing the material on social media, on WhatsApp, and in any other space, and by activating the bell so you get notifications every time we publish new content. So thank you all once again, and may God bless you.